Now, John Moulin started his career as a civil servant and worked up to being the Prefect of Eure and Loir. The Prefect, or Prefect, is the representative of the President. It's an important position, but it's no power except to ensure that elected officials take decisions in line with the law. When war was declared, he wanted to join up. He was declared inapt by the military doctor. He asked for a second opinion from another army base and was declared apt. But the Minister of Interior obliged him to remain at his post of prefect. After the occupation started, he was told by the Germans to accuse Senegalese soldiers of atrocities against women and children. They were actually victims of an aerial bombardment by the Germans on the 14th of June. He refused, as he knew it was a false accusation. He was arrested, beaten, and put in prison. And Moulin was worried that he might give way under further torture. He decided to commit suicide by cutting his throat with a piece of glass. That wasn't successful, and he was put in a cell with the Senegalese. They managed to alert the medical services, and he was treated, then released. It's often said that Moulin wore the scarf in this famous photo to hide the scars of his suicide attempt. Except he was taken in Montpellier before he was arrested. Another rumour bites the dust. He returned to his post as Prefect of Eure and Loire, but the Vichy government sacked him. He decided to join the resistance. He left Chartres on the 15th of November 1940. After a short stay in Paris, he went to Marseille. He had a false passport made under the name of Joseph Mercier. He had two projects. One was to take stock of the resistance in France, then go to England to be the spokesman to the Free French. He travelled round the Free Zone and met several resistants. With a fake visa and his fake passport, he took the train from Marseille to Lisbon in Portugal. He contacted the British Embassy to try to get to England. He had to wait a few weeks. During this time, he wrote a report on the state of the French resistance and their needs. He sent this through the British Embassy to deGaulles. Finally, on the 20th of October 1941, he was put onto a plane and flown to England. The SOE interrogated him. Then he met Colonel Passy, head of the Free French Secret Service. Colonel Passy's real name was André de Waverly. He had been involved in the Norwegian campaign in May 1940. He landed back in France in June, just after the capitulation, and left immediately for England to join deGaulles. Resistance started by individuals deciding they wouldn't accept the occupation. Now, these individuals came together to form various organised groups, working independently. There were 8 main groups and many smaller ones. Among the best known were Ceux de la Libération, politically right-leaning, Ceux de la Résistance, no political bias, Combat, this was a Christian Democrat organisation, Frontiere, or snipers, Front National, communist, not to be confused with the recent political party of the same name. Organisation Civile et Militaire started off as a right-wing organisation but swung to the left as the war continued. Now, Moulin and deGaulles thought that they would be more effective by working together. deGaulles gave Moulin a mission. This was to create the secret army by associating existing resistance groups into one. They didn't want the head of the secret army to be the head of an existing organisation. To start his mission, on the night of the 1st of January 1942, Moulin and 2 others were parachuted into the Alpilles in Provence. To make sure the Germans didn't find their parachutes, the priest, Father Klebs, who was the head of the group Combat in the Vaucluse, collected them and hid them. He kept Moulin's parachute to the end of the war, and it's now in a museum. General Delestraint was chosen to create and lead the secret army. Delestraint was a veteran of World War I. He was called back to serve in 1939. He refused the armistice and went into the resistance. With Moulin, he convinced the Frontiere, Combat and Libération Sud to come together in the secret army. Delestraint took the name of Vidal. He was now working with John Moulin to extend the secret army to the North occupied zone. Amalgamating the resistant groups was a good idea and a bad idea. There was an advantage of efficiency if they were working together, but being separate gave more security. One member being arrested could only lead to other members of the same group being arrested. Moulin was based in Lyon. There were open spaces where two people could meet without raising too much suspicion. And the apartment blocks in Lyon had the advantage of not having a concierge who would see and note all the visitors to the building. At 28 Rue de la République was a boîte aux lettres, or letterbox, where one could leave letters and pick up messages. At number 85 in the same street was the militia HQ. In 1942, John Moulin lived in Rue de la Charité. Not far from there was Place Carnot, where he would often meet other agents. A bit further was a Gestapo HQ in Hotel Terminus, which is now Hotel Mercure. On the 9th of June 1943, Vidal was arrested by two Abwehr agents, Moog and Mont. Robert Moog was a Frenchman and had always been on the German side. He was probably trained in Germany before the war to be a fifth columnist. John Moulin had been resistant until he was arrested, and without any pressure being put on him, he turned and became an Abwehr agent. With Vidal being arrested, a replacement had to be found. A meeting to this end was arranged at the house of Dr. degoujon at Caluire, a suburb of Lyon. The doctor's house was practical because it had a rear exit, and people going into the house was completely normal for a doctor's surgery. On the 20th, John Moulin met Raymond Aubrac and his wife Lucy with their small boy at the park of the Tête d'Or. That was a favourite meeting place, sometimes called a Restistodrome. At this time, John Moulin lived at Place Raspail, next to the River Rhône. On June the 21st, 1943, he left home. Then he crossed the river to get to the Furnicular railway that led up to Caluire. Then he took a tram to Place Castellane, where Dr. degoujon lived. The 5 people arrived at 1:30. When the doctor's housekeeper opened the door, they said, "We've come from Monsieur Lesange." She knew this meant they should be taken upstairs. These were André Lesange, Bruno Levat, Albert Lacaze, Henry Aubry, and René Hardy. The last 3 members of the meeting were late. They arrived 45 minutes later. These were Jean Moulin, Émile Schwarzfeld, and Raymond Aubrac. The housekeeper, Madame Brossier, thought they were patients and showed them into the waiting room. Émile Schwarzfeld was the man Moulin saw as being the next head of the secret army. Just a few minutes later, the police erupted into the house and arrested everybody, upstairs and downstairs. Some passers-by and Madame Brossier were witnesses to a strange incident. 3 men were brought downstairs by 4 policemen. Then one managed to escape. The police fired at him but missed, so he got away. This was René Hardy. He'd been arrested a few days earlier and surprisingly had been released. The other 7 were taken to Mont prison, where they were roughly interrogated by the infamous Claus Barbie, the butcher of Lyon. Moulin was then taken to Paris for further interrogation. He died in a train on the way to Germany. The easy escape of René Hardy led him to being accused of having betrayed the others. Claus Barbie even said that his escape was arranged. Hardy was tried twice, but ended up being acquitted. It wasn't until 1987 that Claus Barbie was finally brought to justice. He was tried in Lyon. He died in prison in 1991. Now, I've mentioned Raymond Aubrac more than once. The story of Raymond and his wife Lucy is a story all on its own. Click the free subscribe button to be informed of the next videos. John Moulin is the most famous French resistant. There are several memorials to him, and many schools are named after him.